तो जंगल का सबसे मतलब जंगल का शेर जो टाइगर को कहा जाता है ना, जंगल का राजा बोलते हैं ना, तो उसको इसीलिए जंगल का शेर कहा जाता है क्योंकि उसका आवाज सबसे जंगल में बड़ा होता है।
You could smell it. As the forest sky was making a slow transition from cold grey to brilliant gold, with their shimmering skin hidden under those pulsing muscles, wild water buffaloes were wallowing in secluded mud baths in and around River Diffu, which originates from Karbi Anglong Hills and passes through the Kaziranga National Park. What a peaceful sight! And what a dormant veil of violence in that peace. When lions and tigers roared loudly and deeply, terrifying every creature within earshot, they are somewhat like human babies crying for attention, although their voices are much deeper. So says the speech scientist Ingo Tidse, Executive Director of the National Center for Voice and Speech, in a research paper published by the University of Utah in the United States. But if you have ever heard their roar in the Indian wild like this, the only time you can think of crying baby is when you feel like turning into one. That's why you've seen so many videos, visitors making outrageously loud noises in nervous tension and asking drivers to flee from the spot after hearing the roar or when the tiger comes too close for comfort in safaris. But people deal with fear differently. Some act from fight and flight response, others show worrying signs, but to hide that they crack untimely or inappropriate joke, the hardcore experts try to decipher whether roaring is made for territorial claims or to communicate with potential mate. And some vigorously sip tea with focus like this might be the last Assam tea reserved by fate. Thank God my guide got this flux full from his home for me. Help to deal with the chill produced by low frequency roars.
उससे ज़्यादा साउंड किसी के पास नहीं है। टाइगर का रोर जितना पावरफुल है उतना पावरफुल किसी और एनिमल का नहीं है। और इसीलिए
What about lion? लायन का रोर आप देख रहे हैं, लायन का रोर
भी है,
वो बहुत मतलब ये है,
लायन का रोर भी बहुत बड़ा है, इसलिए वो भी
शेर बोलता है,
उसको भी राजा बोलते हैं। टाइगर और लायन तो एक जगह में नहीं रहेगा, अपने 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 जगह में रहते हैं।
हाँ हाँ।
तो और इसके बाद आपका आता है एलिफेंट्स। एलिफेंट्स का साउंड उससे थोड़ा कम होता है टाइगर से। तो एलिफेंट से सब डरता है।
वो बहुत खतरनाक होता है क्योंकि एक पैर में आपको कुचल देगा पूरा एकदम कम्प्लीटली।
ये टाइगर के बोलने की आवाज़ है, अगर इसमें रिकॉर्ड हो रही है पता नहीं, बट बहुत क्लियर आ रही है। छोड़ो।
Tea with tiger roar reverberating around the thickly forested rocky terrain where people have apparently sighted spirits. Come on, even if a wish-fulfilling genie asked me to write my desired script for Burapahar adventure, I couldn't have possibly envisioned this. Great tiger sighting? Yes. But this? No. Fantastic sighting of rare western hulak gibbon? Yes, I could imagine asking for that to the genie or tribal goddess Kaku, the supreme presiding deity for all things and being here. But to witness the rarest of rare moment of one-horned rhino meeting in their fabled heaven and hell called Kaziranga? No. Clearly the script and control both are not in your hand when you are in the presence of the planet's most beautiful endangered species, showing you whose home it is.
It's a land that God, if he exists, has created in anger. Taking a close look at what's around us, there is some sort of a harmony. It is the harmony of overwhelming and collective murder. And we, in comparison to the articulate vileness and baseness and obscenity of all this jungle, we only sound and look like badly pronounced and half-finished sentences out of a stupid suburban novel. And we have to become humble in front of this overwhelming misery and overwhelming fornication, overwhelming growth and overwhelming lack of order. There is no harmony in the universe as we have conceived it. When I say this all full of admiration for the jungle. It's not that I hate it, I love it. I love it very much.
We took an aerial view of the misty plain from the watchtower. Here jungle wakes up late, but once they do, everyone has a thirst to quench. As much as the visual of a half-injured water buffalo sitting almost motionless on rippling Kaziranga grassland was difficult to grapple with, the tiger was just driven by his hunger and instinct. Failed to make a kill, the big cat should be mighty displeased. Or will he return to finish the job? A chill ran through my spine as I know tigers have an infallible memory. Their short-term memory lasts about 30 times longer than ours, and their recollection is made up of much powerful brain synapses, which means these felines do not forget as easily as humans. Yesterday, a tiger made a successful strike, though, inside Ghorakati village, and before entering here, I just spoke to the aggrieved cattle owner. We, after all, entered the forest with an invisible temporary visitor badge, and philosophy of science is fine as long as things don't get personal. Someone saying this Burapahar is ghosted appears laughable as long as I don't see or sense any. While here we cannot escape the impression of absolute nullity, Yet I never lost a sense of something that lives and endures underneath the eternal flux. There's an incorrect view of evolution that it drives animals to be selfish, to be uncaring and unloving towards others, as everyone is a potential rival and it's a dog eats dog world from evolutionary standpoint. That's an oversimplistic school level textbook view of natural selection. The true life of a jungle is invisible, hidden in the rhizome. The part that we see above the ground withers away. So when we think of the unending growth and decay in a jungle, as Carl Jung said about life, what we see is the blossom which passes. The rhizome remains.
With restrictions of 10 jeeps per entry, Burapahar is not flocked by regular tourists. It's not a popular sighting zone for either tiger or rhino. It's predominantly not a grassland like Kohora, or not full with lush open area for rhinos to graze on, like you may get to see in Bagori. But instead here you will experience truly dense vegetation. So it's not so simple that every time you enter inside Kaziranga, sighting rhino is given. As a matter of fact, I know folks who did 2 safaris, one in Kohora and one in Bagori, and didn't spot any. But yes, with an average annual growth of 2.7% rhino population, forest has done stupendously well in terms of rhino conservation, and which I have already captured in the second episode of Kaziranga Chronicle. So sighting chances are usually pretty high if you undertake multiple safaris and visit the forest at the right season. However, at Burapahar, we got to know that after almost 8 days, visitors are getting to watch rhinos. And after entering the forest, we saw a huge group, almost 13 individuals actually, sparsely distributed. And not just that, unicorns in Burapahar blessed us in the most extraordinary way, because we have seen rhino mating, which I have captured later on and will show you. From 12 individuals left in the wild to today's 3,000 glorious one-horned rhinos, Kaziranga's rangers and special forces have played a very crucial role to make sure that this happens. Not just in terms of rhino, but overall in Burapahar, the sighting has been phenomenal from the time in the highway, which I have already captured in episode 3, until the end. Like, there were so many animals I have come across which I was watching in the wild for the very first time. So, second episode I mentioned that it is, it's easily one of the most wholesome Kaziranga experience. Not had that roller coaster ride, that's why I mentioned. But if you ask me which range is my favorite in Kaziranga, if I just take away the experience, particularly I have gone through the series of anticipation and frustration in Central Zone. If I just remove that part, then Burapahar is definitely, Central Zone is beautiful, of course, but the landscape of Burapahar, the terrain, everything just fascinated me. What about Burapahar's ghost though? When I will be going out from the forest, actually I narrated the story because that was the time when, in detail I got to know. Before that also I have been, I heard from Mr. Pallab on the way only what's the story, but in more detailing I got to know at the very end, story of the ghost and my take on it, everything I have mentioned there. Yes, put away your man-made worldly worries aside and visit this wondrous range with me, where the rule of the nature holds sway and sleeping wild things lie.
Dewdrops still glisten like topaz crystals on which a swarm deer is gracefully stepping by. A new day dawns on the Burapahar grassland and swampy lagoons, and I am on the only jungle on this planet where king doesn't necessarily mean lion or tiger. Our guard's eyes got brightened as he murmured, "Gaur," which in Assamese means rhino. You are watching with me the second biggest of the rhino species, overpowered in terms of size,
only by the near threatened white rhinos of Africa, but unlike African rhinos, you get a unicorn here. Not many people know about this, but Indian rhinoceros are not the only one to have a single horn. Currently, the most threatened of the 5 rhino species, the smaller Javan rhinoceros, also has a single horn. Indian rhinoceroses are semi-aquatic and are great swimmers. They tackle tall grasses or saplings by walking over the plant with their legs on either side like a bulldozer. They are the ones to bring music in the lives of the forest workers here. Lord Vishwakarma, known to be the divine craftsman and architect of the universe in Hinduism, picked the best parts of many animals on earth and stitched them together. His creation had the skin of an elephant, the hooves of a horse, the ears of a hare, the eyes of a crocodile, the brains of a bear, the heart of a lion, and horns like Nandi, Shiva's bull. But he was not satisfied with the outcome. Vishwakarma creatively twisted, molded, and further modified these parts, and nothing seemed to please him. Finally, he looked at the rhinoceros and decided to add it in his creation by fusing 2 horns into one. And so the local mythological legend goes. The result was beyond his expectation, a masterpiece of the art of imperfection. A 2006 Ohio University study found that the horns most closely resemble the structure of horses' hoofs, turtles' beaks, and cockatoo bills. Looking at this primeval relic whose ancestors split off some 50 million years ago from the horses and tapirs, indeed I was thinking only imperfection can be this beautiful in nature. That's an oriental white-eye whom I spotted near Tunikati Tower. What Daflang Tower is to Kohora Central Zone, that's Tunikati Tower in Burapahar. Shortly, you will see that I have mentioned elephant safari is not operative in Burapahar. And I have very consciously kept that because when I visited there, elephant safari was not operative. And it is a very latest development. I got to know yesterday, actually, as a matter of fact, that Burapahar has opened up doors for elephant safari. I have protested against it in my own way, not just through the video I made before, but also have sent a letter to the authority. But yes, it's unfortunate that elephant safari is getting very much popular in Kaziranga. And I understand the reason because elephants come very close to rhino, right? Because they both are mega herbivores and they have the similar grazing field. And rhinos do not deter coming close to the elephant. So it's very, you can easily get a very top level aerial view. And people enjoy that. But elephants go through enormous mental trauma in order to get domesticated. So I am completely against it, and which I have spoken about it multiple times before as well.
Look, I have already seen 16 one-horned rhinos, countless elephants, numerous bird species, 2 reptile species in my first 2 safaris at Kohora Central Zone yesterday. I came to Burapahar for something unusual and tested that flavor on the way and inside the village as the forest fringes blessed us with dream sightings of western hulak gibbon, capped langur along with few exotic birds. So I almost forgot that we haven't actually entered inside the jungle yet. While my guide was cracking joke and telling me that you can go back once you see a tiger since yesterday evening, if you have seen episode 3, I guess you understood why I didn't content myself only with Central Zone Safari. Also, come to think of it, in terms of Big 5 of Kaziranga, I have met with only 2 of them up close and personal so far. While hog deer was abundantly present in the central zone, swarm deer herd I have seen only from a distance, yet to see a wild water buffalo till then. And oh tiger! I guess the relentless felt pursuit yesterday behind one tigress who made my head spinning at the end created a resistance towards rush in my feverish body. I was feeling little better in the morning but didn't get any recovery time, so I was not fixated on that tiger who killed a cow here. In fact, Mr. Pallab seemed to be way more invested in that prospect. The Japanese practice of forest therapy is called shinin yokyu, which means taking in and bathing in the forest atmosphere. Quite simply, the process is to just head into the forest, engage your senses with therapeutic relaxation, and that's about it. And anyway, for me, the experience of jungle is not about only chasing the adrenaline high. But who am I to plan if sheer nervous excitement is whipped by the jungle?
ইমান দেৰি লগাইছে আহক আহক ইফালে ওলাইছে মাল মাল ওলাইছে মাল ওলাইছে আহক
What are you saying, Elaine? There's a tiger print over there.
Tiger. Over there.
Oh.
पूरा जंगल है
इसने नदी क्रॉस करी है खतरनाक जगह है भाई ओह माय गॉड
कि ये एकदम फ्रेश है अभी अभी रिसेंट वाले पगमार्क्स है ये
यहाँ से आया है
तो अभी गाइड वही अभी वो डिस्कस कर रहे हैं कि इनको फॉलो करके टाइगर स्पॉट हो सकता है
वहाँ से अंदर गया मछली या फिर किसी और चीज़ के तलाश में फिर वो उधर उस तरफ गया
बेसिकली क्या हुआ है गाइस इन्होंने एक कैटल किल किया है वहाँ पे कैटल किल किया है तो ये अब राइट साइड में जाएगा वहाँ जंगल में खाएगा फिर यहाँ आके वापस से चिल करेगा
Mango's found it just there.
And tiger must have had a water and walking here.
I was reading once again Kenneth Anderson's The Call of the Manitou, and in this book he mentioned that at the sight of fresh pugmarks, observers might be wise enough to raise 100 prayers and hold his breath and not move a muscle, not flicker an eyelid. For although tiger has practically no sense of smell, he has an abnormally acute sense of hearing, an uncanny sixth sense and marvelous sight to detect even in the minutest movements in the air, in the vicinity. While there are very few of us who can practice such discipline these days, and sometimes we become vocal in nervous excitement as well, if we want to spot a tiger, it is in our interest to maintain absolute silence during such moments. But my guide went berserk calling other guides, and people started vlogging right on that spot. Tigers in the tourism zone these days have become somewhat used to the sound of the jeep and us as well. I think they find us as utter nuisance, but they are also intelligent enough to understand that we pose no threat. So noise might not deter some of them. Even otherwise, they understand why just this one sign can make adults break into childlike excitement in tiger reserves. So much so that guides who regularly visit jungle twice a day are not above that sensation. And this was special, a long track of pugmarks of a huge male tiger on the alluvial deposits of the Brahmaputra river in valley. Tiger enthusiasts would kiss this ground, and I was quietly thrilled. The first sense of intensity hit my mind that I was trying to avoid. I reminded myself that this is no Bandhavgarh or Bandipur. Not that I was thinking negatively, but Assam's forests are too dense to easily spot tigers.
ये पगमार्क्स को हम फॉलो करेंगे और देखते हैं कुछ साइटिंग होता है कि नहीं। होपफुली हो तो जाना चाहिए, तो मज़ा आ जाएगा, लेकिन कुछ बोल नहीं सकते।
My guide was reluctant to leave this spot, and by this time I kind of knew his pulse enough to anticipate that. No, let's not get lost here once again to track the tiger. Instead, admire what's in front, I told myself. He is an avid birder, but I realized that due to habitual pressure from visitors for tiger sightings, he was trying hard from the very first safari to give me that special experience. Little ahead, we spotted those rhinos I was showing you a while ago. I broke into a grin when Mr. Pallab muttered with his characteristic sprightly smile, and I quote verbatim, "Aaj to dhamaka hoga." The nip in the air hasn't fully warmed up by the sun when we spotted another one-horned rhino with her baby. First time I was watching a rhino calf in the wild. Full unicorn family was present in and around that spot, and only one more jeep was present, so minimal noise. Other jeeps got dispersed, and I was enjoying the feel of the forest with melodious bird sounds. This one looked massive and prehistoric. Weighing usually between 4,000 to 6,000 pounds, there's nothing quite like this in this planet. Greater one-horned rhinos are usually solitary though, except for females with young. Males are not aggressively territorial, even though they maintain loosely defended territories, but they also occasionally form groups like this. Outfitted with AK-47s and advanced gears, including Russian-made night vision glasses, poachers now target for rhino horn and kill them in the process. The major smuggling routes run north into Nepal and east through Manipur and Nagaland to Myanmar, headed for Vietnam and China.
Black marketers have been very creative in getting people to pay a lot of money for something that offers the same benefit as chewing your fingernails. You heard it right. Rhinoceros horns are made up of keratin, the same substance as fingernails, and grow continuously. Yet in the black market, promoted as a cure-all elixir of life from anxiety to cancer, horn prices from here can fetch up way more than black rhinoceros of Africa. It's a hazardous work protecting an endangered species who is more expensive than a walking gold mine. Kaziranga's rangers are stationed in any of the 178 anti-poaching camps on 3-month rotations. They are out on patrol day and night, mostly on foot, though some monitor the park in jeeps, by boat, or on elephant back. After we spent some time with those rhinos, my guide drove fast to bring me at the Tunikati Tower stopover, as he knew the tiger dragged the cow somewhere near. But as soon as I stepped down from the jeep, looking at the facial expression of handful of photographers and guides present here, I realized that we missed the tiger. My dream run with today's sighting came to a scratching halt as I scrambled on dry leaves. The predator was indeed here roughly half an hour ago on the opposite side of the river bank. A mild disappointment struck me. Perhaps had I not spent so much time observing capped langur mother with her baby on the highway, we would have seen the stripes by now. Mr. Pallab was constantly inquiring about the latest position of the tiger from highway, and twice he alerted me to hurry up, but I was too engrossed. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. So the fact that a tiger was walking on this land and perhaps still lurking out there somewhere were enough prospect to make me thrilled. Something or other we would have missed anyway in that pursuit, and looking at this largest tract of protected land in the sub-Himalayan belt, I reminded myself that everything has panned out as it should be. While some amount of ground information and strategy are crucial, ultimately if Tiger decides to show up, I would still have an encounter by end of the day. And if the royalty decides to not summon me in court, nobody can make it happen. There was an hushed anticipation in the air as I proceeded further. At the confluence of the Brahmaputra and Diffu rivers, the landscape looked dramatic. A vast expanse of glistening white sandbanks and rippling light silver water. Its hilly and narrow paths wind past ancient trees that tower above you, festooned with orchids and wrapped around with vines, which have, over the edges, formed thick twisted ropes. "He may come out once again," whispered a guard. If this was the same tiger who had killed cattle, I thought there might be a remote chance, because the tiger needs to come out to drink water in between while consuming 40 kilograms of raw meat at a time. But since he already made an appearance not too long ago, he might be sitting at a place content or taking a nap. We could forget about sighting in that case. But then a tiger can move a carcass several times heavier than itself for large distances. One individual in Myanmar was observed moving a 770 kilogram of gore bull.
यहाँ टाइगर घूमते हैं रात को, जहाँ तू अभी चल रही है, पता है तुझे? गांव के पीछे यहाँ रात को कल टाइगर ने किल किया है कुछ। उस टाइम पे हम डिनर कर रहे थे रात को, 9 साढ़े 9 बजे का टाइम होगा गुरु भाई, है ना? 3 बार रोड किया था, है ना? और वो रोड भी शायद कैमरे में रिकॉर्ड हुआ होगा। तो कुछ ऐसा सा एरिया है यहाँ पे पहले कैमरा ट्रैप्स लगे हुए थे तो इधर आना अलाउड नहीं था, अभी भी थी हैं लेकिन इधर तक आ सकते हैं थोड़ा सा, इससे आगे नहीं जाना, इस रिवर से आगे नहीं जाना।
Only in designated spots one can get down from the vehicle inside Kaziranga with armed guard and guide, and a strict penalty of minimum 5,000 rupees is imposed on vehicles that do not obey speed limit and other rules. Two wildlife enthusiasts and their guide along with the guard have seen the tiger from afar, and they were describing his movement. All of them were still waiting with the hope that he might just come out on the sandbar again. The chances are still very much alive. Suddenly, the cattle owner's lost face flashed in my mind. While the villagers here have lived in proximity with wild animals for centuries, the last few years have witnessed substantial agricultural loss owing to crop raids by wild boars and elephants, which cost them more financially than such clashes with tigers. While it is kind of inevitable when plantations and farming happen next to the forest, here villagers have lost substantial amount of their original places too due to land erosion. So it's not so straightforward that they grabbed forest land necessarily to face such outcomes. Mr. Babuli Hajarika, a resident of the Burapahar village, was not so much bothered by tigers as much as wild boars. 6 years ago, my son was attacked by a wild boar which sliced his right hand, he told us. Many farmers here stopped cultivating kasu or taro flower and mitha aloo or sweet potato, though he persisted with harvesting taro despite the threat of boars since it is a profitable crop. While the Forest Department, along with the NGO Worldwide Fund for Nature India, installed electric fences to keep away elephants, they are not much of a deterrent against boars as they can easily slide beneath the fences. So the Forest Department was helping him on a trial basis to burn dry chilies, a smell wild boars just can't stand. Villagers take their livestock to the riverine sandbars or what they call as chores for grazing, which are also resting and breeding ground for tigers. Livestock are damn easy prey for a tiger in comparison to a deer, who are designed to escape predatory attacks. Villagers get negligible compensation if the tiger strictly kills cattle inside the village, but the cattle owner gets only a meager compensation of 4,000 rupees when a cow is killed by a tiger inside the village boundary. There's no provision to pay ex gratia for livestock killed by predators inside protected areas. It's difficult for a farmer to feed unproductive livestock. Besides, stricter norms for transporting cows have left people with little option but to leave the animals to their fate. Oxen and cows worshipped by many Hindus are seldom given away for slaughter. Infirm, sick, and old cattle are rather abundant around many Indian national parks, and if you were a tiger, would you not rather develop a taste for them instead of running after a hog deer who might just dodge you? That's how a tiger learns to venture inside village here because Kaziranga has no resource scarcity in terms of herbivores other than during Brahmaputra's terrible wrath in monsoon when the forest flooding drives them to a higher plane for survival. And if humans get caught in the middle, the complexity becomes manifold. Only few months before my visit, one person was attacked by tiger in Bebejia village, but fortunately, he survived.
सेकंड ब्रांच जो नीचे से जा रहा है ऊपर
My guide said it was almost impossible to spot gibbons once inside the Burapahar range. That's why we spent so much time on the highway. Standing on National Highway 37, he also said,
एक ऐसा एक प्राइमेट है जिसका पूंछ नहीं होता है, तो ऐसा दो प्रकार के एप्स है, उसे लेसर एप बोलता है और ग्रेटर एप बोलता है। ग्रेटर एप्स में चिंपैंजीज, ओरांगुटान्स ये सब आता है और वो तो इंडिया में नहीं मिलता है, और लेसर एप्स में आता है उलग गिबन जो इंडिया में सिर्फ नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न पार्ट में ही मिलता है, और ये बहुत ही फैमिली केंद्रिक होता है।
India's only ape, the rare western hulak gibbon, and the primate with great hairstyle, capped langur, much to our surprise, both showed up this time inside the forest. I was stupefied at this sight. Few hours ago, I was told.
तो ये पेड़ों में ही ऊपर ही बच्चा पैदा करता है।
और खाता क्या है ये नॉर्मल जो
लीव्स खाता है।
लीव्स?
हाँ, पत्तों का लीव्स। ये कभी भी जमीन पे नहीं आता है।
वो जमीन पे कभी भी नहीं आएगा?
कभी भी नहीं आता है। रेयर ओकेजनली ऐसा हो सकता है कि ब्रांच टूट गया जंप करते वक्त, तभी वो नीचे आ सकता है। अदरवाइज वो
चिंपांजी को तो मैंने ग्राउंड में देखा है।
चिंपांजी आता है, लेकिन
हाँ।
हुलक गिबन नहीं आता है। हुलक गिबन क्योंकि इसलिए नहीं आता है क्योंकि उन लोगों का डर है लेपर्ड से।
No branch was broken as far as I could see, and the gibbon came down from the top canopy to caper on the ground. Could it be possible that when wind blows through the boughs of lofty hulang trees, through the quiver of a million leaves that whisper at night like a distant ocean, along with the flash and flicker of fireflies dancing around the branches, coupled with unearthly cry of a distant jackal pack against the faint sound of a stream, when a black figure that rarely touches ground suddenly prances forward on the forest floor? With their weirdly extended arms and calls, that's what offers visitors with the chilly dread of spectres? Could gibbon be the reason for ghostly reputation of Burapahar? Can't say their sight and sound are not at all spooky. And guess what? In terms of DNA and morphology, hulak gibbons are more similar to us than a monkey. So what if villagers have imagined them as spirits and somehow that myth got popular with visitors? Our guard, Mr. Kumar, squarely said no, corroborating the unsettling story I heard before. But he also mildly agreed that all these factors might have added up over the years. Not a whiff of the tiger yet, but this was my 30th one-horned rhino sighting halfway into the third safari. I was feeling deeply content even though I saw the footage of the tiger on the white sand captured by one of the visitors, and that orange was looking like a Paul Gauguin mystical painting. I reminded myself that sighting hulak gibbon is even more difficult than a tiger, and yet A tiny part of me, perhaps the quenchless part, was seeking for the savage even though what's out there was pretty impressive.
বড় ওই ওখানে ঘুরছে কই দেখি হ্যাঁ
আঙুলের ছাপটা খুব সুন্দর এসছে
টাইগার টাইগার ওরে বাবা
মেল টাইগার
चला गया बोलता है निकलेगा कि नहीं निकलेगा रुकना है आपको बहुत दूर है
नहीं, मैं बोल रहा हूँ टाइगर उस साइड में गया तो जंगल का तो हमको उस साइड में जाना चाहिए।
नहीं
गाड़ी
इस
लेके।
तरफ तो हम लोगों का टूरिस्ट रूट नहीं है।
अच्छा, my heart skipped a bit when someone said, "It's a tiger." We all hastened to the edge, but I couldn't spot anything. Apparently, someone has seen a glimpse of stripes through his binocular. Even though there was no forest department boat safari operative here, but we found a local boatman who confirmed that the tiger moved a bit and vanished inside the bush at the opposite bank. He was ready to take us a little inside the water for a quick round at our own risks. I decided to take the plunge because, for sure, a briefest movement happened with great concealment. In thick slush or coed sand, the splayed impression showed a wider gap between the pad and the toes, and generally a seemingly larger pad. However, just a pebble underneath can displace a toe or change the pad's outline, so it's difficult to gauge for sure whether it's the same tiger's pugmarks we have seen before, but that seemed most likely. Keeping aside the hoopla, if we wanted to seriously trace, we needed to consider the ground condition, age of the track, including the texture and moisture content of the soil. Neither of us exchanged a word, but just a look at my guide was enough suggestive for me to realize he wanted us to leave the spot. If the tiger now comes from the opposite direction, we would be in plain view, and that's not a good news for either of us. But gibbons wouldn't have touched ground like this inside the forest if they had sensed tiger movement nearby. So I theorized that the tiger was likely to be at rest, though might not be very far from where we were standing. What an irony! Now I couldn't even totally relish gibbons without thinking about tiger. We came back to the square one. I could feel my shivering nerves almost at this point. It was rather risky because tigers in Burapahar are not as much used to humans as other ranges, apart from occasional contiguity with villages. I realized that after all the resolve to not get lost in the hot pursuit, I got sucked in by the moment. And it's natural because in my front there's live example of how riverbank erosion and sedimentation lead to formation of new lands and water bodies. Plus, succession between grasslands and woodlands represented outstanding examples of significant and ongoing dynamic ecological and biological processes. These natural processes created complex habitats which are also responsible for a diverse range of predator-prey relationships. Standing at the heartland of this wild, it's foolish to say, I won't dance with this macrocosm because it may result in vain tiger sighting attempts.
সাধারণ জায়গা। আপনি হাতিটা কোথায় পেয়েছিলেন? আর ছিল আরেকটু আগে। টাইগারের পায়ে ছাপাইছে? ও একটা
The moment I saw this, I realized there's no real possibility of tiger here anymore. They are incredibly shy creatures though, and spotting even one of these striking primates in the wild is considered by naturalists as a truly rare trait. I met 7 of them since morning and was utterly fascinated, especially by their loud and conspicuous songs that transmit over long distances, often up to 1 kilometer or more through dense forest vegetation as it became clear from the top of the tower. In case you are visiting from the Ghorakati side, this is the first safari zone, and other than few wooden cabins and a handful of relatively new places, there's no good accommodation option present currently at Burapahar. So even if you come across fancy terms with property names like eco-village or ethnic villa, be prepared to deal with all sorts of dysfunctions and disappointments should you decide to stay here. Also, the only nearby medical facility is a tiny tea estate hospital, which may not be open even in daytime. I guess the ghost reputation didn't augur well here for tourism, and I'm glad, because the lesser developmental activities happen in such sensitive zones, the better. We drove for some time after leaving the watchtower and came face to face with one of the most terrifying sights I saw in jungle, wrapped in eerie silence except a faint tock 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 sound. A green and red woodpecker tapped away at the bole of a tree with his powerful beak. Is this how nature maintains balance? Will this one survive? This was not how I was imagining to see Assam's wild water buffalo. Tigers are perhaps not equipped to ask philosophical and theological questions, but those carrying significant moral and legal consequences. Us, what about us? Wailing in excruciating agony, few years ago here a rhino was left to die in the most gruesome manner in a pool of blood for its horns. Those behind it were partly driven by the same hunger, but mostly by greed. Which sight is more grotesque? Forget about that, but why you are shooting this and not helping the hurt animal? How heartless! I often come across such inane questions on the internet under injured animal posts. Tell you what, it's worse actually. We were not only not helping, we were waiting here for some time, anticipating the tiger's return. I was also silently praying against it, as I didn't want any predator to spot the susceptible buffalo, but a tiny part of me simultaneously desired for the glimpse of a certain royal stripe from a distance. Yes, nature is complex, and that includes our nature too. But here is a simple fact of jungle. Onlookers shouldn't interfere with the web out of misplaced sympathy. The jungle has its own rules, and it's irresponsible and cruel to prevent predator to catch prey as much as it is irresponsible and cruel to facilitate the process in a natural habitat. When it comes to controlled environment, things may be different, but imposing our sentiments on the natural world usually doesn't go well in the long run. Even forest workers rescue hurt animals only under certain conditions. Predator-prey interactions do not solely depend on biotic factors. Rather, they depend on many other abiotic factors as well. One such abiotic factor is wind speed, which can crucially change the predation efficiency. I hope that the strong wind perturbs tiger's sense of smell and locomotion enough for the injured buffalo to find a safe hiding spot. Already the animal must have put up a brave fight or cleverly outsmarted the opponent. But in this condition, the bovine stood no chance against a tiger if found out.
Rhino head on.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my god.
And there we meet again. Thankfully, novelty doesn't wear off when it comes to wildlife, as every meeting can be unique. However, only a handful becomes exceptional enough to reserve a permanent place in our memory. Many return from here without seeing a rhino, and here we are watching an incredibly rare moment, as typically rhinos don't mate in the open. Also, mostly the mating behavior takes place in the dark of the night, which indicates how secretive are rhinos with their mating rituals. What are the odds?
This is like once in a lifetime.
Courtship behavior in rhinos involve touching, licking, and chasing before the mating starts, but it can also get violent soon. They are polyandrous, meaning both males and females have multiple mates. Female Indian rhinoceroses indicate their reproductive availability and readiness by urinating frequently and whistling loudly. These signals typically attract interested males within 8 to 10 hours. Males test the urine that females leave behind to confirm their estrous state. That information about mating readiness can also be procured from middens or dung piles, as shown in the first episode of this series. Males respond to reproductively active females with precopulatory behavior, such as prolonged chases of 1 to 2 kilometers. These behaviors ensure that males are physically fit and they are likely to be dominant bulls. I read about this dragging behavior of copulating male and female rhinos, in which female carries the male on her back to a long distance. I couldn't believe now I'm watching this. Rather odd, isn't it? While males are being dragged, they cannot walk properly on their hind legs, which may lead to severe injury for the male. And this behavior indicates that the female must be strong enough to drag the huge male body for a long distance of 150 meters on rough surfaces. Occasionally, the female also gets injured during the process and becomes aggressive during courtship. resulting to physical attack on the potential father. Indian rhinos are reluctant breeders. That is, the desire of courtship and mating behavior in the male and female do not synchronize all time. Male one-horned rhinoceros also undergoes a period of heat, and these periods must coincide with the female before mating takes place. Come to think of it, most matings happen during this February to April time frame, even though it can vary. And that's why timing plays a crucial role when it comes to sighting. When courtship becomes successful, the female complies to the male for copulation, and the male mounts at times for hours. After completion of mating, the male usually dismounts immediately, and both the partners disperse from the mating site. Male Indian rhinoceroses exhibit no parental investment beyond the act of mating. Basically, they are the typical absent fathers. Conversely, females care for their young for an extended period of time. Just before this, we saw someone struggling to live, and here a new life was in making. Perhaps this is the vileness and lack of symphony. Or perhaps the divine designer has made Kaziranga. Perhaps if we get over from our logical prejudices and presumptions, we can identify this is exactly what great scientists are telling us today. Imperfection is the driver of the evolution itself. The fact that nothing is created from nothing, and the existence of nothing is recombined and transformed continuously to become something. The mythologies around our physical world has more in common with Darwin's ever-evolving tangled bank than with Plato's timeless forms, and the local legends got more wisdom than we care to imagine. 33 and counting. One more interested male was looking at the mating pair from a distance. Do they experience envy or jealousy? Despite the anecdotal evidence, scientists have long struggled to study and identify emotions in animals, especially given the difficulty in separating our own biases and anthropomorphisms. But research is starting to suggest that jealousy, at least, is a primordial emotion that both humans and some animals share. It is not learned, but rather an inborn emotion that evolved to protect any type of social relationship from interlopers. So I won't be surprised if the not chosen one was feeling heartbreak in his own way. Overcoming impossible challenges, rhinos are now thriving here, and there's no bigger testimony to it than this. The ritual can continue for hours, but we didn't have much time left. Things that I haven't even imagined to see came true, but deep down, heart still wants what it wants. How ungrateful of me, I thought. But honestly, one more magical appearance, and my heart would be totally full. Someone reminded me of the watchtower. Who knows what was going on there? This is the reason I started thinking about tiger again. Like gibbon, they are highly arboreal and only rarely descend to the ground. And like me, Indian white-eye, formerly called as Oriental white-eye, appears bespectacled due to its distinctive white-eye ring. That's why it is called Choshma Pakhi or Choshma Tuni in Bengali. Hyperactive in and around their compact cup-shaped nest, they continued feasting, yelling, and grooming as I faintly heard a whisper in the nearby canopy. Minimize 1,000-fold the sound of us going through a packet of chips, and you will comprehend the sound. I was told that it was the murmur of a tree full of wild silk moth caterpillars systematically chewing up all the leaves. Not everyone is so subtle about their presence. When our guard called rhino as Gaur, I was confused for a moment because this is what I know as Gaur. I missed the subtle difference in pronunciation. The Gaur is another massive herbivore. Bengal tigers' encounter with them often get intense as Gaurs are truly formidable opponents in size and strength. I documented one such encounter later in Bandipur, and I still can't quite fathom how tigers manage to take them down. But then tigers often encounter even Indian elephants in the Himalayan foothills and Terai regions. And one of them very recently even managed to defeat a rhino. So, let's give her thought a break. I couldn't miss the irony where in spite of wonderful experience, I moved around with the thought that screamed, I'm not going to think about you. But I guess, as the Persian poet Jalaluddin Rumi said, what we seek is seeking us. We already have come across that herd of wild water buffaloes I have shown in the beginning, grazing and wallowing, surrounded by submerged vegetation in shallow water bodies. The global population of these buffaloes is around 4,000, out of which 91% lives in India, with over 2,600 estimated head count in Kaziranga, the world's single largest population. Now I have properly met with 4 of the big 5, and the 5th one was calling. Few other japes who were present with us to watch the mating ritual overtook us. A tiger roar shook Burapahar out of nowhere. The tiger's roar filled the cave with thunder. Mother Wolf shook herself clear of the cubs and sprang forward, her eyes like 2 green moons in the darkness, facing the blazing eyes of Sher Khan. Who can forget these lines from Rudyard Kipling's classic The Jungle Book? Well, I did. You will forget all lines from everywhere upon hearing the roar for real. We decided to stay put to identify the source of the sound first, as other japes proceeded forward. I didn't hear such loud roars before.
Or maybe it wasn't about the loudness. A tiger's roar, often referred to as a long-distance advertisement call, is uttered at an average fundamental frequency of 158 Hz. Bioacousticians found that when tiger produces such a roar, they can actually create frequencies much lower than this. This low-pitched sound, called infrasound, can permeate building, passes through mountain, cuts through dense forest. The awe-inspiring impact that roar produces has got more to do with the psychological impact and not just the loudness. So in the beginning, when our guide said that they are the loudest animal, he of course was speaking for a tiger reserve like this, because if you follow my channel, as I have already mentioned, that sperm whale, the loudest animal on earth, can produce high-pitched clicks at around 230 decibels. Tiger's roar is nowhere, come close to the comparison. Of course, you cannot just compare in terms of decibels between a land mammal and an oceanic creature. Bowhead whales, blue whales, greater bulldog bats, African cicada, tiger pistol shrimp, bottlenose dolphins, Atlantic spotted dolphins, then white bellbird, Or even roosters actually have considerably higher calls in terms of decibels than a lion or a tiger. In fact, ostriches and hyenas have very similar decibel levels with tiger and lion. So what makes the roar iconic is not just the loudness alone, but the overall impact it creates. In fact, trust me, an elephant's trumpet from deep inside the jungle, or even the howler monkeys in deep South American forest, can create actually more resonance. But the overall feeling will be a thrilling or pleasing if the sound is coming. The trumpeting sound comes from long distance, but for a tiger, the instant response, actually, that bodily response that it generates is a fear. And it's hands down one of the scariest sound out in the nature. By the way, I'm talking about only roar. Let's not confuse that with the growling sound. Roaring is a distinctive and loud vocalization which usually carries over very long distances, and it actually serves very specific purpose. Even top tiger experts cannot say always what every roar signifies. It's usually for communication, but it can be used when suppose the tiger has taken down a large prey as a form of energy release, the roar. Sometimes it just signals sexual receptivity. Sometimes tiger just want to establish their presence and mark their territory, to communicate other animals about their presence, and sometimes even to other tigers about their presence, as you may have seen in the second episode of Kaziranga Chronicle, in the form of rarest form of roaring, right, which is spooking. I don't know whether you have seen it or not, but I have added the link of the second episode at the end of it. So if you haven't seen it, you can actually go and watch that episode as well, which is pretty interesting, I believe. At times, even mother tiger roars to actually call the cubs. Very rarely, they can also roar during mating, though they mostly use growling and other form of communication, but they can also roar during mating. So imagine after watching black baza, one-horned rhino mating, and even a red dragonfly mating. So I was in that mood, and I was just thinking at that point of time, what if I could get to see a tiger's mating now? Probably I didn't get to see tigers near the Tuniketi Tower because I am now meant to watch tiger mating in the wild.
But frankly, tiger sighting became a secondary thought after hearing the mighty roar. I thought nothing could be as wishful as we humans imagine it to be. But when my guide was talking about tiger's roar en route from Central Zone to Burapahar range, even in my wildest imagination, I didn't expect to leave it within a matter of few hours. Neither did he.
आप देख लीजिए किंग कोबरा और बाकी स्नेक्स का भी जो ज्यादा आवाज करता है उसी से सब डरता है ना। जो कोबरा होता है वो हिसिंग साउंड। पाइथन अभी हिसिंग नहीं करता है तो पाइथन से कोई डरता भी नहीं होगा।
कि वो उसका मारने का तरीका भी दूसरा है कंप्लीटली ना, वो
कंप्लीटली दूसरा भी है। अगर आपको इधर पाइथन मिल जाए आप इतना डरेंगे नहीं।
अच्छा,
पास में अगर आपको पाइथन मिल भी जाए तो आप इतना तो नहीं डरेंगे, लेकिन कोबरा होने से तो आप बहुत डरेंगे ना। तो यही मुझे लगता है कि ये सब वो हिसिंग साउंड, ये साउंड से ही मतलब
कम्युनिकेट करते हैं ना, वही उसका ये है।
मुझे वही लगता है, साउंड से डराता है पहले।
As we could see from our facial expressions, all three of us were concerned about the situation because practically we were standing in the middle of a trail with nobody inside, and what's even more alarming was the fact that we were clueless about the direction of the sound as it was echoing through the hills. Scientists used measurements of tension and shear strength of big cat vocal folds to predict the lung pressures and fundamental frequency range at which the animals roared, the range of rates at which the vocal folds are able to vibrate. They came up with 10 to 430 Hz or cycles per second, which is consistent with known roaring frequencies of 40 to 200 Hz in lions and 83 to 246 Hz in tigers. Men speak at 100 to 120 Hz and women at a higher 200 to 250 Hz. But big cats are much louder because they more efficiently convert lung pressure into acoustic energy. For your understanding, as the camera audio haven't done justice here, what we were hearing was more than 20 times as loud as a gas-powered lawnmower at its source. Not exactly ear-splitting from where we were standing, but could easily make one's stomach drop. The sambar as if picked up on an invisible signal. The silence settled in for a moment before all the wildlife got into a high alert, as I have already shown in the beginning. As a bird's sharp cry echoed through the forest, a musical fanfare swept through, and each swarm deer started warning the others. Extinct elsewhere in South Asia, even though once found throughout the Brahmaputra plains, recently the population of the vulnerable eastern swarm deer has dipped here. On the brighter side, they are now distributed beyond Kaziranga, such as Manas and Orang National Park and Laukhua Burachapuri Wildlife Sanctuaries in Assam. The tiger's roar as if has invited us into this hidden world of elegant deer species with distinctive antlers, revealing their role as indicator of ecosystem health and threads that weave the fabric of biodiversity here. More popularly known as Barasingha, meaning 12-horned in Hindi, and otherwise known as Dolhorin in Assamese, which means deer of the swampy places, their preferred place to hide is grassland and not the forest. We became totally quiet amidst the wild orchestra coordinated by fear and survival instincts. After all, the ruler of the land was speaking. We might not understand why and where, but with their extraordinary sense of smell, they knew what's up even in the silence between roads. Amid such a prolonged series of vocalizations, I started believing that we might see the tiger soon. We have already exceeded the official time limit though, and so we decided to spend another 15 minutes or so attempting to find the source of the sound before moving towards exit. We also needed to travel back to the resort near Central Zone for lunch before once again going out for the fourth and my final safari in Kaziranga. I was considering Bagori Zone for that. We further slowed down at the sight of an extremely elusive terrestrial mustelid native to Central and Southeast Asia, the greater hog badger. It's not easy to spot this animal as they are predominantly nocturnal and solitary species. Little while ago we have seen one, and similarly this one was going towards its own underground home as a response to the roar perhaps. Their most notable feature is the pig-like snout that is used for feeding, along with modified teeth specifically used to move soil. Hog badgers are great diggers and can dig out of sight if they feel threatened. Also, they can produce secretions from their anal glands, but it is unknown whether or not that's a defense mechanism. Their coloration pattern is aposematic, meaning they possess distinct coloration or patterns to warn other organisms. Their only known predators are tigers and leopards, even though hog badgers are carnivores too, and they are one of the world's largest terrestrial extant mustelids, going on average body mass, perhaps behind only the wolverine and rivaling the European badger. The roar became fainter and fainter. It didn't make much sense to move further inside as we were unable to locate the sound. Other jeeps also couldn't locate, as Mr. Pallab found out by calling those guides. He offered me tea as we decided to while away some more time here in case we could sense any movement. But it felt like tigers in Kaziranga were teasing me. I sensed great possibilities during yesterday's alarm calls in Kohora afternoon safari, but didn't see any after a major roller coaster. And today, tigers seem to be always just one step away, just right beyond our grasp, and yet making own presence felt intimately on our nerves more closely than ever. If I don't get to see one in another 10 minutes or so, I will have only one more safari left to spot tiger. I mentioned the obvious. A certain touch of desperation I sensed in myself for the first time. Not that I have always enjoyed tiger sighting in forests where I did multiple safaris. In fact, on most safari trips, I didn't. So I was pretty much used to it as that's the norm. In fact, what I so far experienced in Kaziranga was nothing short of incredible, I reminded myself. There's hardly any documented experience of puking here, and that should be satisfying enough. And yet, I already started feeling slight disappointment. Perhaps due to the discussion around tigers since I opened my eyes today and the emphatic roar that continued for a long time, my expectation became high. Also, tomorrow I'll be leaving for Pobitora and that forest has no tiger. Why am I thinking this way? What if Kaziranga now pulls off another Kabini for me, where I saw Kismet, the queen of Kabini with her cubs, at the very end when we were almost going out from the safari gate? Yesterday too, we came across a herd of elephants while waiting for tiger. In my guide's opinion, this is how tigers were testing us. How true is our love? Someone else might think this is how Lord Ganesha, the elephant-headed god, was blessing us. In ancient India, almost everyone had to live for years in the forest as a Vanavasi. And this is probably why for our ancestors, the forest was more a benign than a malevolent presence. In the Western mythological tradition, on the other hand, the forest is often seen as terra incognita, impenetrable, full of invisible danger and unknown threats, a realm of magic and mystery and a repository of fabulous riches. But it also creates illusions and hallucinations, and some of them can be harmful, like the myth of ghost here, I thought. Still, I was curious to know the local version on our way out. Want to meet a ghost? Then you have to come here at night with a cigarette and light, Mr. Pallab said. What? He was actually speaking to the guard who accompanied us and helping me by translating what Mr. Kumar was saying. The latter mentioned that he couldn't stay here for more than a week after getting his posting here and shifted towards Hatikhuliti estate. They sounded rather somber when they conveyed that if a person drives or walks alone on the road at Burapahar towards Bokakhat at night with a lit cigarette on the right hand, till date he gets to see a lady in white dress crossing the road. In my mind, I started thinking this couldn't be the act of poachers because they won't achieve anything by dressing up as a lady in white at night. The emo didn't fit. I wondered what was getting lost in the translation, and so I further probed. Apparently, in the 60s, a girl had committed suicide here after being betrayed by her lover. Since then, people started complaining about strange noises and visions, so much so that the forest guest house here remains totally deserted for decades. Those who came to stay, none of them could spend one full night and fled. Because they saw the woman, what she was doing, I asked. I was told that she is only visible on the highway at night when someone crosses while indulging in a smoke, and then something happens to the person. They lose control and invariably meet with road accidents. I was lost in deep thought. Why cigarette has to be present on the right hand? What a particular spirit. I wanted to say so, but I restrained my amusement. Both of them haven't seen that ghostly lady on their own, and both of them seem to be convinced that's what happens because they heard stories from friends and family. Mr. Pallab's uncle, who is a herpetologist, has caught a glimpse of that woman and shared that she had a skeletal body surrounded by a white, blurry aura. As for the guest house, visitors felt constant disturbance and knocking with unexplainable sights and sounds. How cliched could it be? A lady in white dress on the highway, straight from B-grade horror movies. I started ruminating. Maybe this is the classic case of pareidolia. We experience it whenever we stare at clouds and see rabbits, ships, or gaze at the moon and see a face. Our brain adds information to our perception of the world, and the vast majority of perception is the brain filling in the gaps. Maybe someone's imagination created this, and then the story found popular resonance, as suicide was a rather unusual event those days in a remote place like this. I didn't express my incredulity vocally, but it was pretty much evident on my face. Mr. Pallab asked me to check the abnormally high accident rates here on the highway at night. Accidents that apparently didn't make any sense. And I was relieved not having to hide my take, but I still didn't say anything because how come without any substance, so many people are reporting about the same things in 60s? Not just locals, but even urban visitors. Wait, is this the modern version of the fable love story where a boy named Kazi and a girl named Rangai eloped and got married against societal protocols and vanished into the forest, never to be seen again? They didn't make a happily ever after as Kazi betrayed Rangai. Since few members of Karbi Anglong hill tribes now stay at Burapahar, did they craft another savage love story? Did they twist the original version so that the cattle owners don't leave their domestic animals late to prevent attack from leopards and tigers? And then the story spun out of control. I could only postulate. Popular television shows on ghost hunting convince many viewers that blurry images and emotional reactions with ambiguous recordings sabotaged by bad lighting and faulty equipment are proof enough. Capturing sounds, orbs, electrical fields, and infrared radiation at the alleged haunted site may appear high-tech for many people. But the fact is, all of these measurements are rather worthless. The high accident rates on the road is true, but when people don't follow the speed limit, many animals get hurt and die, especially at night. Did people here add fuel to the story with the hope that the thought of ghostly intervention would make commuters to skip the highway and their revered rhino wouldn't see a ghastly end like this? But it might backfire as people could try to speed more at night just to escape ghost. Snake is one of the most common animals that come under wheels, and Mr. Pallab's uncle, who deals with amphibians and reptiles, have seen the ghost. Also, carelessly thrown cigarette butts caused forest fire here a few times. And here, spirit gets disturbed only when someone is seen with lit cigarette. Are these just coincidences, or am I casting aspersions on genuine accounts of people? I trembled a little as my stream of thoughts was abruptly interrupted by a phone call. A guide friend of Mr. Pallab from Kohora zone called him to inform that in one of the camera trap footages, the foley was visible today for the first time after the rhino kill. Forest Department was concerned about her condition after the battle, as she might have sustained some injury too. When I saw the latest Forest Department's picture of Dafoli shared by his friend, I gulped for air. For the next few minutes, I could not remove my eyes from the image. Half of her face was covered in fresh blood. With a thick paw on flesh remains of the rhino and blood dripping from her face, she was looking absolutely deadly. What Burapahar's ghostly vibrations couldn't do, she did within few seconds. I could feel rational thoughts slowly leaving my system after looking at those piercing eyes. Wasn't it a tad bit transcendental that we saw so many pugmarks and heard a series of roar without any endgame here, as if all this had no culmination and purpose when Dafoli was out in the central zone? Is everything connected? Was the forest spirit all along sending us a message that I failed to discern? The last cold breeze of Burapahar, dampened by the noon as if whispered to my ears, entered these enchanted woods. You who dare. When I was busy looking for phantasmic impressions here, the real killer was out and flexing. A quick ripple on the nervous system before I grinned at myself. Mind knew someone from the property was checking whether I needed something, as Hotel PBX doesn't get good reception here at times. But now Burapahar has freshly captured my muscle memory. With words in my hands like clay, I try in vain to shape the lady in white into an albino hawk deer to fling across the forest sky.